Hello, I am Vicky Hawkesworth, a presenter in the UK on BBC Radio 1, and I am joined today by an incredible singer-songwriter based in LA. We've got Lauren Waller. Hello.
I'm
Hi,
happy
how
to
are
be
you?
here, excited to be here and talk to you.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I've really been enjoying listening to your music. I feel like it's got this lovely sort of light, fun feel to it that
Oh, thank you
I
so
mean, I've
much.
never been to LA, but I feel like it encapsulates LA for
Oh,
me.
thank you and that's actually, it's funny that you say it's light and fun because if you go back and listen to some of my earlier stuff, I used to say I can never write happy. I'm always writing more like depressing, sad, really in your feels music. But yeah, with this last album, I really wanted it to be fun and feel like Los Angeles because that's where I'm from and where I was born and raised, and that makes me happy that that translates well.
Absolutely, it translates. And it's interesting to hear you say that. So it's obviously a bit of like a new era for you in your musical journey, I would guess then. And you've called the album Talking to Myself. Where did that concept for the album come from?
Well, I mean, that's really just what it feels like when I write. I don't diary, I don't journal, but I write song lyrics, and it really does just come down to I'm sitting and I'm talking to myself when I'm trying to just work through all my emotions. That's really what I do with my songs. I love to storytell and I love to make it personal to me. So I'm really just thinking, okay, what can I write? What do I want to work through today? So I'm talking to myself.
Oh, perfect. I love that. And you've said as well that it's a bit of a love letter to your 20s, to Los Angeles, heartache, romance, and my personal favorite, chaotic energy. I think we can all relate to a bit of chaotic energy quite regularly. Why did you want to focus on that era in your life in particular?
I mean, having been through, I'm not quite out of my 20s yet, but having been through the majority of my 20s, it's such a anybody who's lived through it or is about to, hit their 20s, it's a really weird, funny, interesting, chaotic time. And it just felt right to really kind of mark that and really have just like a little history book for my own little life. But yeah, the 20s are really special. And I'm sure every single decade that you go through, I'm hoping will be just as special. But the 20s, my 20s, I experienced a lot and they're special to me right now.
Amazing. Well, it sounds fantastic, the album as well. Now, I find it really interesting to sort of hear about the journey on how the idea for an album started and how you then like created it and turned it into this piece of work. What was the writing and production process like?
So it was a little interesting because a few of the songs that ended up on the album I had already previously released as singles, and I never really planned to put them on an album. But as I started writing more, and last year, 2 years ago, I started thinking maybe I can really make something out of this. And so not all the songs are written this way, but a lot of them were I write with two writing partners, Ryan Benio and Monty Malone. They're fantastic. They're writing partners and producers on the album. And I went over to Ryan Benio's studio, and he had already prepared some tracks that he had been working on with me in mind, and said, I thought you may really like this. I thought you may want to write off of some of these. So I picked out a few that I really loved and really connected to. And I went home and I started talking to myself. I started writing different lyrics and stuff to them. And then went back into the studio, collaborated with Monty and Ryan on them, workshopped them a little bit. And that's how a lot of the songs on the album were made. A few of the other ones, we all just went into the studio and said, okay, what do you want to write about today? One of my favorite examples of that actually is my song Night Stalker, where we just all sat in the studio. I had no idea what I wanted to write about. And I think Monty just started saying random words, just like red lamp, red room, and then he just said Night Stalker. And Night Stalker actually, it's a reference to this is where it gets a little dark and more of the weird topics I write about. But Night Stalker is actually a reference to a serial killer who was in Los Angeles in the 80s. And Monty was like, do you know anything about like serial killers? Is that weird? And I was like, I actually love the show Criminal Minds. I don't think that's weird or like to me to write about, but I thought, how interesting would it be to write a story about something that was inspired by a serial killer, but connected actually to what an abusive relationship can look like. So that sometimes is how songs got made. yeah, I kind of like that it was new and different every time that we were trying to write something.
It's just so interesting to hear about the way that you got from Night Stalker and then turned it into this, because as a listener, obviously you put your own impressions on what a song means, and you never really know if that's what the artist fully intended it to be. So that's so interesting to hear. That's the story behind Night Stalker. Is there a reason that the tracks are in the order that they're in? Are we meant to listen to it through as if it's a story?
So it's not actually a story, but I spent so much time working on what order I wanted this album to be listened to. I'm going to tell everybody, yes, you should listen to it in that order. Because I had originally written some of these songs and just released them as singles and wasn't originally planning on it being a complete album. It kind of was a puzzle that I had to figure out. How am I going to work out all these songs? And I spent hours listening and over and over again to all the tracks, trying to see what lined up the best, having other people weigh in on it. And it's not telling one direct story, but it definitely takes the listener on a journey, takes you on an emotional journey. There's highs and lows. And I really like the ending. The last two songs of the album, there's Best Coast, which is this big, fun party anthem. It's like party anthem, Best Coast. We love to party is literally what the song is about. And then the next song, the last song, is called Nothing But Life. And Nothing But Life is a really just introspective, looking inwards type of song. So I wanted that to be even an emotional journey that listeners would go on, where they're going up from this, oh, we're going out every night, we're getting drunk, we're having fun, we're partying, and then immediately hit the listener with this next song where it's like, okay, now it's time to reflect. It's time to reflect on your life a little bit.
Oh, but what a gear change. But that's the beauty of music, isn't it? Being able to go on that sort of that journey, that roller coaster with it, which I think you've done beautifully. Going back to talking about that writing process, I've just thought, as you said, like your friend was in there just sort of throwing words out at you. Do you ever challenge yourself to just go, I want to write a song about this, and it could just be a random word or a random theme, and then you just have to create something around that? Or do you think that's something you would potentially like to try in the future?
Well, so definitely with Night Stalker, that's just what ended up happening. But for the most part, I like to write about myself, which I think most artists do. It's the most honest and truthful place that you can come from, is your own personal experiences. So I typically do just come into the studio, or I'm sitting and I'm writing and I'm just inspired by something that's happened to me. And sometimes it takes me time to really go through and process those emotions. So something that I've written about recently could have happened 5 years ago, but when it's not opening old wounds, but you're kind of like, okay, I'm looking back and I'm reflecting on this, and you're kind of just reliving everything again. So definitely, I don't typically write with the more randomized words, but it is definitely a fun writing experiment, and I got a really cool song out of it, like Night Stalker.
Yeah, interesting. No, that's amazing. Now this is where I want a bit of gossip. This is where I want a bit of tea. Are any of the songs on the album based on real events or real people?
Yeah, they all are. Like I said, it's all about my life. People have come in and out of my life, but this is where I'll get you, where you want the gossip and the tea. My second EP, I named No Names Here. And everyone asked me, why do you name it No Names Here? And I said, it's because all of my friends and all of these people in my life want to know who I was writing about. And I said, I'm not going to tell you, because sometimes you just don't want to get into it, right? You don't want to get into it with the people that you've written about. But on the flip side of that is, while the songs are about me and my experiences, I want the listener to be able to put themselves into the song. That's why I fell in love with music originally. I was able to really connect to songs, connect to the feelings and the emotions that were brought up in it. And some songs, you connect to a song and it can save your life. It can change your life. It can inspire you to do something. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's really cool. If I don't really ever get into who I'm writing about, people can then take the song for themselves. And that's really what you're doing. That's the scary thing about releasing music. Once you release it, it's not mine anymore. It's the world's, and it's the listeners, and it's my fans. So I wanted them to be able to connect to it as well.
I mean, you say it's the scary thing, but it's obviously as well, the best thing about it is that, like you said, it can impact people so much that it saves a life, or it like proves their day in some way and gives them that pep in their step to go and do whatever it is they need to do. So it's a really beautiful thing. Now, I know you said you don't want to admit to people if their songs are about them, but have you ever had sort of any awkward scenarios where someone has guessed that a song is about them and they've said to you, oh, is that about me?
No, never, which is really
Okay.
funny. And I've written songs where, I mean, my friends all come to my shows, my friends listen to my music, they all know what's happening in my life. And I've never once had them, I think they probably know, I just won't give them the answer that they want, but they've never asked me, oh, is that about me or is that about so-and-so? So that's actually never happened to me, which is kind of nice. I've even had people that I've written songs about in the audience at a show. They have no idea it's about them. So I don't really know what that says about our relationship, but sometimes it happens.
And they're just singing along to like the heartbreak anthem, just going over their heads. Brilliant. Now, obviously, we've talked a little bit about the process of how you produce and write your songs. Were there any songs on the album that you found difficult to write?
There were a few. I mentioned earlier where you can be writing something about an event that happened a few years prior. And so Green Eye Jealousy, which is one of my favorite songs I've ever written. It's very different. It's a little bit just out of left field for the way that I typically write. That song was a little hard for me to write because that was a little bit of not reopening wounds because I had already processed everything, but that song's about a lost friendship. It's not, everybody thinks it's about like a romantic relationship because it's called Green Eye Jealousy. And I'm like, listen, you can have those feelings with friends all the time. And it's about a broken friendship. And that was more difficult for me to process and understand how I wanted to write about that friendship. But the funny thing is once I figured it out, I think that was one of the fastest songs that I really worked through and wrote the lyrics all out to.
Oh, wow. So it was like there was this brick wall up, and then once it was there, it was like you could run away with it. That's amazing. And I think it's so true what you're saying about friendship as well, I suppose, because in some ways you don't really expect that you will lose a friendship. You know, in a relationship that they can come to an end, but with a friendship, you kind of almost want to be friends for life. You don't want that to end. So,
and that's the thing about being in your 20s too. You're growing and changing. Everybody in your life who's also the same age, they're all growing and changing as well. And you either grow up and change for the better with people, or you both realize and step away and go, well, we're just not getting what we needed from this friendship anymore. And maybe it's best that we like wave from afar and say, like, I'm still going to support you, but that support is by not being friends anymore.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, obviously, you've said that it brings all these feelings up when you write your music and it sort of opens wounds up for you. How does that then feel when you're performing on stage? Does it bring everything back again, or do you find a way to almost like close the door on it and perform it for the audience?
I have never gotten overly emotional singing one of my songs. I have done a few cover songs before where I have gotten emotional and I have cried on stage just a little bit, which is a little embarrassing, but I think I get most of the processing and emotional part in my own music done when I'm writing it and when I'm recording. It's great for when I'm recording because you want to hear that emotion in the studio. You want that to translate to the song. But I think by the time that I'm performing the music, I'm just so excited to be singing. I'm so excited to be performing live. I don't get too emotional about my own songs.
Oh, amazing. So it's almost like it's a closure for you then. Writing that song is the closure, and then you can just go out there and have fun on stage and bring it to life. That's so fun. Now, was there anything in particular that inspired you when you wrote City Lights?
So City Lights was a weird song for me. That was one of the songs that Ryan had given me to go home and try to write lyrics to. And I was actually this was a song that I was struggling with. And I eventually came up with something and I brought it into the studio and I told Ryan and Monty, I was like, I don't really think I like what I wrote. This feels like something I would have written when I was younger. It was very emotional, it was I'm not going to use that word because now apparently I can't pronounce it, but it was very melancholic. It was very,
no, I'm not pronouncing it right either.
It was that. It was just different, obviously, if you listen to City Lights and what really came to be. And what was great is that Monty said, well, I've written some stuff, and I think that the bridge that you wrote will fit in perfectly. And we can really just add and build here. And so Monty was like, I've written this like cool song about, well, it's about Los Angeles, and it's about being young and clueless and not really knowing what you're doing with your life, but finding this really encapsulating joy in that cluelessness. I think I think that talking about the city lights in Los Angeles is maybe not as romantic as like the city lights in New York would be, but it just is the chaos that comes with figuring out your entire life, which I mean, as a whole is kind of what Talking to Myself was about. But City Lights really does feel like a little love letter to that chaos and to Los Angeles.
Oh, amazing. Now there is a reference in the lyrics that says, my neck, my back, my kitty, my neck, my back, my kitty don't laugh. Is that a reference to the Kia track from 2001?
It is.
Why did you want to include that in the song?
That was Monty's idea. Monty is one of the funniest people and funniest writers. He has come up with so many really clever lines. If you listen to Best Coast 2, there's some really just key ones that he came up with. But originally what he had written was my neck, my back, my kitty, my giraffe. I just wanted something funny in there. And I sat there and I was like, I don't know about that. I don't know. And then he said, well, what about Best Coast? You said, I don't know, to a lot of the things that I was suggesting. And then we went with it. You loved it. It's such a fun song. And I was like, okay, you're right. And then I just said, let's just put in Don't Laugh, because people who get the reference will get the reference, and people who don't will just fly right over their heads. But yeah, that's kind of just where that came from.
Yeah, it's definitely a lovely little addition to the song, because I was listening along and I heard it and I was like, oh, is that a reference to Marba? So I love that. Yeah, brilliant. Now, one of my favorite songs on the album, Backseat. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Backseat is exactly what you think it's about. It's about hooking up with somebody in the backseat of your car, which I'm sure a lot of people have done. But it's about hooking up with somebody in the back of your car, but it's also about just that spark when you are first getting into a relationship with somebody, or just that really that to me is like, you're so young and you're so in love and you're just like, I want to be with you wherever we are, no matter what, even if there's a little risk involved, even if it's a little uncomfortable, even if it's just any of those weird feelings. And it just is about young love and the excitement that comes along with it and how fun that sometimes can be.
Yeah, I love particularly that lyric of I'm giving you the green light tonight, because I love the nuance of it being about being in a car and there being actual green lights, and then you're going, all right, go on then, backseat, we'll go for it. And I think, are you prepared for the fact that it might inspire some people to get onto that backseat? You might be responsible for some babies in the future, maybe.
Well, I don't know if I'll be responsible for it, because I know people were doing it long before I wrote about it. But if anybody wants to credit me for any babies, sure. I love kids. I'd love to meet them if I'm ever responsible for one.
And Lauren's a great name. They could name the baby after you. So as an artist, obviously, we've discussed about your writing process and how you create an idea and turn it into a song. But how do you feel that you approach being an artist and creating your art?
I have been an artist my entire life through a bunch of different mediums. I grew up originally doing drawings and oil painting, and then I did theater, technical theater backstage. I do obviously singing, choir, all these different things, and I love combining all aspects of how do you spark inspiration, because I think that really is just a through line in all mediums of art. And so I love getting really inspired and feeling that spark and thinking, okay, how can I translate this? My notes app on my phone, as I'm sure most singers and songwriters are, is just filled with so many different fragmented lyrics and so many fragmented ideas, because you were constantly getting hit with, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good line. Sometimes you'll wake up in the middle of the night and you're reaching for your phone and I'm like, I got to write this down before I forget it. So I love the inspiration that comes with being an artist. And then obviously growing up in Los Angeles, and being surrounded by so many different communities and diversity and different, I mean, LA is just a epicenter of art. That has always been so inspiring to me as well. And getting to be surrounded by so many people who are so passionate about their art and their craft and what they do, that's always been really inspirational for me.
Oh, so there's like sources of inspiration here, there, and everywhere. It can strike at any moment. I definitely relate to that, like late night, you're falling asleep and finally this idea comes to you and you put it in your notes and then you read it the next day and you're just like, what does that even mean? So I hope you're better at taking notes than me, definitely.
Oh, no, definitely not. It's always chaos in there.
Yeah, I remember once having an idea for the radio and I woke up and the note just said Battle of the Noses. I have no idea what I was thinking.
Well, okay, maybe we can workshop that a little bit and hopefully
Okay.
Battle of the Noses one day can come to fruition then.
Will you make a song about it and put it on your next album for me?
Maybe. I'm already have some cogs turning in my brain. Battle of the Noses could be a little bit of a inspiring thing there.
Oh, I love that. Oh gosh, well, send it over to me and I'll have a listen.